Okay, so Gemara. We were really at the bottom of Amadal and base. So we were learning about the different order of the placement of the parshas. So Mati asked yesterday if we were talking about the Shalrosh at the time. So Mati asked, so why do I need a different Shalyad? The Teretz is the same order that the Rebbeinu Tam places the parshas in the Shalrosh. In the single scroll of the Shalyad, you have to write them in that order too. That's not fixable. The Shalrosh, technically, you could open it up and reorganize the parshas, but you can't do that with the Shalyad because it's written in one scroll. That's why you have to have a separate set of tefillin if you want to keep his eitzah. I also said over that how did it ever become a machlokes? How did Klal Yisrael ever forget? So I said over that there was a period of time, about 100 years, where they didn't wear tefillin. But Rav Baruch Nussbaum sent me from a sefer that they were showing about a shita that just because we have that minig, just because that's how it's done, we need to understand where it comes from in the Torah. And therefore, Rabbeinu Tam said, listen, minig, but I want to know the halacha. So it wasn't uncommon, he brings, for them to reassess even if there was a prior minig. I don't know if they would act on it or not, but they definitely reassessed. I mean, they must have acted on it because they're very talking about different film. So let's have a look at the second to the bottom line on Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Omer Rab Chananel, Omer Rav. Hichlef Parsha Yisrael. Whether you hold like Rebbeinu Tam, whether you hold like Rashi. What if you switched around the order? Pshulois, it'll be possible. In other words, whatever the order has been established, whether you hold like Rashi or Rebbeinu Tam, it has to be that way. If it's the wrong order, it will be possible. But Amar Abaye Lo Yamorin, that's not necessarily true in all scenarios. Ella Gviyasa lebriyasa ubriyasa legviyasa, which means, just looking at these diagrams, let's look at Rashi. There's two inners and there's two outers. The only time it'll be possible is if you put either Vayiki V'yacha or Shema Yisrael on the outside, and you have Kadesh Li and or V'haya Im Shemaya on the inside. That's where there's a problem, because the inner ones need to remain on the core, and the outer ones need to remain on the perimeter. However, what if you swapped out the two ends? So you had Kadesh on one end, and you had Vayikivach on the other end, and you flipped them around. That wouldn't be a problem. Less lumba. Amalei Rava, I don't understand. Mashna gviyasa lebriyasa. Sai, the one that's supposed to be on the outside, so see the air, is not seeing it because it's now on the inside. And the one that was supposed to be on the inside, is seeing the air. That's if you're mixing up an internal with an external. One second. But briyasa nami, even if you swap out the two ends or the two central ones, you also have a problem, because it's still seeing the wrong side. It's either exposed to the air on the right side or on the left side, but a specific where it needs to be. It doesn't make a difference. If any one of the four parashas are out of place, this tefillin is going to be possible. The only thing I wanted to mention, we get such a fundamental machlokes between Rashi and Rebbeinu Tam. What's the reasoning for why the Rebbeinu Tam argues on Rashi? So I just want to share that. It's a very simple argument. If you look at the Lashon of the Brisa says, Ketzat Tidron, Kadesh Li. Now when we read it, when Rashi reads it, Rashi's reading it from right to left. So Kadesh Li, V'haya Kiviyacha, Miyamin, that's starting from the right, and Shema, V'hayim Shemaya, Mismoil. So then comes Shema, V'hayim Shemaya. That is how Rashi learned this order. But Taisha says, I don't understand. If it was just going from right to left, it should have just said, Kadesh Li, Miyamin, followed by V'haya Kiviyacha, followed by Shema Yisrael, followed by V'haya Im Shemaya. Why does it start saying that Shema Yisrael is Mismoil? If you're going from right to left, just say from right to left, and you start with Kadesh Li, you go right through. The fact that the Brisa repeats Umismoil and makes a new category, umismoil, and from the left side, and Shema Vayim Shema Mismoil, it's a mashma that you're now starting first. You're starting from the right, and you have Kadosh Livay Kivyacha. Then you're starting from the left, and you have Shema Vayim Shemaya. So Rabbi Tam's Shita comes from simply the mashmoyis of the Taich of the Brisa. It's just from the right it's these two, and from the left it's these two. Which would mashma starting from the right you have these two, starting from the left it's these two. That's what the Machlokes is based upon. That's how Tosfos explains it. So to know like. It's not like our psukim in Lomdis. It's very simple how to understand the simple translation of the words of the Brisa. Zok der Heilige Gemara weiter. V'yomer Rab Chananel Amarav. Titura the Tefillin. Now Titura is the base of the Tefillin. You know, we have the box of the Tefillin itself, but it sits on a base that's a little bit wider on three sides and much wider on the fourth side from the box of the Tefillin itself. That is a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. It's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai that is required. Amar Abaye ma'var to the tefillin, which is the place where the tefillin folds over, which is like the long base side, where the ritzua goes through. That's why it's called ma'varta, because it's where the ritzua passes through. Is also halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Now the question is, the ma'varta, is that made out of the same material as the rest of the tefillin? Our tefillin, it's all one piece, right? So it's made out of the same piece of leather. But Tosfos doesn't necessarily say this. If you look at Tosfos says, Umashma, I'm on the third line from the top in Tosfos, Umashma mitoch pirisha kodesh shabotim vatitura hakoil me'or echad. It's all one piece of hide, ve'eino hagen kain. Now, why weren't they noig? Very simple. Because in to form the shol roish is pretty intense. You got to take a flat piece of leather and make it into 4 compartments. Forming leather like that is not so easy, especially without the sophisticated machinery that we have nowadays. So it was very common for this part to be made out of very thin leather, the leather of a behemoth daka, like a sheep or a goat. But the lower level, the mavarta, they would make out of much heavier leather, out of a behemoth gasa. And that's what Tosfos shows over here. So this part used to be made with a daka, but this part, which is much heavier, was made with a behemoth gasa. Nowadays, all of our tefillin that we have are made from a behemoth gasa. It's much more durable. The first pair of tefillin that I ever got, I don't even know how you were able to tell, but it was made from a behemoth daka. And my mashgiach he saw that I was wearing it in yeshiva. You come to yeshiva, and the mashgiach says, Yosy, you need to get a new pair of tefillin. You know, I was so humiliated, like the mashgiach tells me, my tefillin is no good. He says, your tefillin is kosher, but you need to get a new pair of tefillin. So I ended up getting a new pair of tefillin. You know, my grandfather, he should rest in Gan Eden, he didn't know anything about saffras, and he went to Yisrael, and this is what a cipher sold him. He didn't even know what he was looking at. So I ended up getting another pair of tefillin that was a much better pair of tefillin.
So how did you get it? I don't understand. Why did you get it if you already had a pair of tefillin?
Because it was made out of the hide of a behemoth daka, which is not that good. It's very fragile, and it could easily become puzzle.
Oh, so okay.
V'yomer Abaye said, Shin shel tefillin. We know we have a shin on either side of our tefillin. One is a 4-headed shin, and one is a 3-headed shin. Halacha l'Moshe Messinai. V'tzarech shiyagia charitz. Okay, that's a different thing. So let's look at the shins. There are 2 shins. Rashi talks about them. So let's have a quick peek at these 2 shins. Shin shel tefillin. Lebeis chitzoina, on the outer sides. We press in the cloth, which allows the letters of the cloth to be boiled. Tosfos actually gets a little bit more involved in them, so it's pretty interesting just to learn Tosfos. Zok Tosfos, Kosov b'Shimusha Rabba, the tefillin, there's a sefer that was called Shimusha Rabba the tefillin. I guess it was their version of a practical halacha sefer on how you make tefillin. Tzura Deshin, the Amina of the right side, it's Gimel Reishi, with the Smaila, and on the left side, it's Dali Reishi. It's 4 heads. The Abach Leslamba, it doesn't matter if you swap the right with the left. Now, there's actually a whole shaila, what's right and what's left. Is it right from the perspective of the wearer, or is it right from the perspective of the person looking at the wearer? So it's not really clear right and left. I don't even know offhand art film. Art film, the four-headed sheen is on our left or on our right? I don't even remember.
I'll look this morning.
Yeah, this morning I'll pay attention. Oit kosev boy, shemanichin al klaf haparshiyos, klaf cholok echod, v'kar choy boy. The klaf, when you take the parshiyos on the klaf, you wrap them all in one little bag of klaf first. Why would you do that? Zoktosh, maybe that's referring to a shalyad. B'shema b'shalyad kamar im kosfu b'dalad oiris. Remember, you're supposed to write the shalyad in one long scroll. But if it was written in 4 different scrolls, before you put it into the bottom, you should wrap it with like a little bag made out of ore. Oit kosfu b'sham, Amar Abaye, kasfinu agvil, shaper dami. If you wrote on the gvil, which I guess would be the margin, mechein halacha. I don't know how that's possible. The behed yarminin beper kamot yayin tefillin agvil mikras finan. Oikasov betikun tefillin sha'oisosam merchavim bezet spice. There should be 2 fingers thick. That's how big they should be. If you have dinner tvei, and if you make them bigger, shaper domi, it's good. V'pachas, and even if it's smaller, the misal v'hachi. So there's a minute of how it's done, but it's not ma'akid. Now, where does this minute come from to have a 4-headed shein? So I'm going to tell you where it comes from. The Mesivta brings down the luchos. In the luchos, how are the letters written? The letters were airspace, right? And the stone formed around the airspace to form the letters, but the letter was the airspace, right? So the 4-headed shin is really a 3-headed shin, because the space in between the 4 heads are going to be the 3 heads of the shin. So we want to sort of duplicate the style of writing that was on the luchos themselves. The shin on the luchos themselves had 4 stone pieces to surround the three arms of the shin. So that's where our minhag comes from, or the Gemara. That's where our minhag comes from to have a 4-headed shin. It's really a 3-headed shin if you look at the flat part within the 4 arms of the 4-headed shin. Zog to Gemara weiter. So Pashup Pshat means if you have 4 bottom in the Shal Rosh, they have to be separated down to the bottom. You can't just have them like a little bit separated at the top and then they're a common box. They have to be separated all the way down to the bottom. Rav Simi Miradamar, Kivan the Minkar, as long as you could tell that it's 4 compartments, Loy Tzarcha wouldn't be required. V'yamar Abaye, high kill for the tefillin, the cloth that the tefillin is written on, Tzarcha lemivdike, you need to check it very carefully with a magnifying glass. The Dilma is Reusa. Maybe there's a little pinhole in it. Uve'ina ksiva tamo. And there has to be a perfect ksiva. If there's a hole in it, then it's not going to be a ksiva tamo. You don't need to check it with a magnifying glass because kol musa b'adakla. And there's 2 pshatim in this. Rashi learns if there's a big hole, then when you write on it, some of the ink is going to fall through. If the hole is small enough that even if there's a hole, but the ink will bridge that little tiny hole, that will still be kosher. There are those who learn that the kolmis, you could feel a little bump. So as the sofer is writing, if he goes across a hole, if he senses a little bump when he's going over, that means there's a hole there. You shouldn't use that cloth. We have black ritzuyos. How do we not need to be black? Well, I'll show you that the ritzuyos do not have to be black. Tefillin and kaish nois and elba minon. You have to tie on the tefillin with leather. But color-wise, ben yuraikos, ben shechayos, ben levanais. The only color you should stay away from are adumais or red. Lo yasa mipnei gnai v'dover achar. What's the gnai and dover achar? Gnai means you might be a person who scratches his skin a lot and it's bleeding, and they'll think that the red comes from your bleeding. And dover achar means could be ishtadida was pirsa, and that's where the blood came from. So therefore, stay away from a color that people might misinterpret as to its source. Rabbi Yehuda, he would use chelas, which is wool, to tie his tefillin on. And Rabbi Kiva didn't tell him anything. So it must be that you don't have to use leather. It must be that Rabbi Kiva didn't have a problem with it. I'm going to tell him, no. Hey, Leira, he probably didn't notice it. He probably didn't see it. Vimra, had he seen it, Avada loy hayamanichai, he would not have let his Talmud tie it with wool. It needs to be done with leather. Ma'aser Hyrcanus ben Osher ben Elazar ben Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus is the son of Elazar ben Hyrcanus. Shayakasha Tvilav Bishul Shanish Shalar Goman. He would use again wool, purple wool. No one told him anything. Again, Evshar Oisha Tzadik Rab Benoy V'Lamichabay Amalaya Ein. Yeah, Leira, so who said he saw it? Vimra loy hayamanichai. Katani Mia, we still have a brisa that says that yes, it has to be leather, but the color has been Yeroikis, been Shcharis, been the Bamas. It could be any color. You said it has to be black. So the outside, the leather part, has to be black. The inside doesn't necessarily have to be black. If it's only on the inside, why did the bride say, but don't make it red on the inside because of Gnai V'Davar Acher? Who sees that? It's against your skin. No one's going to see that anyway. So because sometimes your strap turns over and people will see the red and they'll misinterpret it. So at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, the outside has to be black, the inside has to be white, but there are those who are makpid that they have the whole ritzua black on both sides. They actually make ritzuas that are black through and through, a little more expensive, but those are the recommended ones. Tana Dr. Gemara, Tefillin merubais. The tefillin have to be square, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now, we're going to see in a moment that merubais here does not necessarily mean square. It just means it has to have 4 right angle corners. But maybe rectangle would be allowed. Amar Papa, b'tafron uve alachsoinon. Sai, when you tie it down, sometimes if you tie tight, it'll squeeze one side, so it won't be a perfect square. Uve alachsoinon. We know that there's a direct relationship between the diagonal cross of a square and the length of its sides. And that is illustrated clearly by the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So therefore, there would be, if it's a 2 inches by 2 inches, there's a specific amount of space that its diagonal would be. And it has to be precise in that way. So the reason why I said merubais doesn't necessarily mean square is because then what is Rav Papa adding? So the Mefarshim say from the bryce itself you would just know that it has to have 4 right angles. Rav Papa is telling us that it has to be a perfect square. Lema Masayale. Let's say if we could bring a raya to Rav Papa that it has to be a square. If you make your tefillin round, sakana, it's a sakana ve'in b'mitzvah. Why is it a sakana? Rashi says because if you bang into something, it could puncture your skull. If it's flat, it's I guess it'll spread the weight more, so it's less likely to puncture your skull. But you have to make it square. My papa, no, masnisin davida kiamguza. What if you would have had rounded on the outside, but flat against his head? That would be allowed over here. Papa is telling you that it has to be square everywhere. Omer Abhuna. Tefillin kol zman shepenei tavlo kayemes would be ksheros. Tavlo rashe ze or shalbatim. So even if there's some tear in the bias, if the main structure on the outside is complete, then you'll still be kosher. Reb Chisda Amar, it depends on what happened. Nivseku shtayim. So we're looking at 4 boxes, right? The tefillin shorosh consists of 4 boxes that are connected only at the bottom, not at the top. So if 2 of them were punctured, so there's a hole in the sides of 2 of those bottom, the tefillin shorosh will still remain kosher. But shalosh, if there was 3 compartments that were penetrated, then it would not be kosher anymore. Even if 2 are kosher, that's only if they're not 2 side by side. So 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. But if 2 side by side get punctured, then it will be possible. That's one pshat of Rashi. Rashi has another pshat, that even if it's 2 side by side, but what if their holes are not in the space that they share in between them? If one has its hole on the far side and the other on the far side, then it would not be a problem. V'zeh keneged zeh lo yamaron elo b'chadita. Only new tefillin do we say there's a problem if there's these holes. Aval batiktiv, if it's old tefillin, less lanba. And Rashi explains that the reason for it is, if a new tefillin tear, it means you have very poor quality leather. It's not going to be good tefillin. But if it's only torque is very old, then there wouldn't be an indication of its poor quality. Amar le Abai le Rabbi Yosef, hechi damyon chadita. How do you assess what's called new? Vehechi damyon atikta. And how do you assess what's called old? Amar le kalecha ki misli bei bishlocha v'hader cholim atikta. If you stretch out the leather, and when you let go, it gets back into the same shape, that would be a sign that it's old. And anything that doesn't spring back into its original shape, rather it accepts your reforming when you stretched it, that would be considered new. So if it's old, it will retain its shape and it would flex back into its shape after you stretch it. It's more elastic, I guess. It's less elastic.
Unlike myself. As you get older, it becomes less elastic.
But if it's new, you could actually still form it. An older thing, you can't change you can't change habits. So the shape that it's taken, it's going to be very hard to distort that shape. A newer thing, you could possibly distort its shape. That was one version of the difference between new and old. The inami, or turning on Tamid Beis, or if you yank the ritzua, will it pull the bias? That's considered new. But if you yank the ritzua and it won't pull the bias, it'll get pulled out of the bias or something. That's a tiktok because it's definitely too brittle and fragile. Abaye was sitting in front of Rabbi Yosef. If ziklei ritzua did tefillin, and his ritzua tore, can I tie it together? It doesn't look very nice, but can I tie the two torn ends together? Rabbi Yosef told him, it has to be ksiv, kshira tam, it has to be complete. Rashi says, what does kshira tama mean? Shetei kshira no, shall look nice. If you have another knot besides the ritzua, where it's knotted behind your head, sulei have a kshira, it would not look nice. Loshanach kshira tama means ritzua shalema. Well, like sure, it has to be a complete ritzua. Shouldn't be patched together multiple pieces. Amar lei Reb Acha. Amar lei Reb Acha. Bered Reb Yosef lo Rabashi. Mal mitfarei. Could you sew it? So making a knot, that's big and ugly. But if you sew it and you could put the seam in the back, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. V'ayla letfir legav. Omar, he told him, Puk chazi ma'imadavar. Go see what the Olam does. And Rashi says, no one does that, therefore it's unacceptable. Tosfos says exactly the opposite. The Olam does it. If the Olam does it, it's only fit, then it would be good. Omar Papa, Gardume ritzuos ksheros. If the ritzua after the kasher is torn, we have, what do we do with our ritzuos of the roish? We pull them over our shoulder and they usually come down almost to our waist. Well, what if right after the knot, it got cut off? There's just a small little stub coming out. Ksheris will be kosher. V'lav melsi, but it's not true. You know when, if it's chopped off and it's too short, you can use it. If it's your tzitzis, or if it's the ezoi with which they would spritz the mayim of the paraduma on the tummy. That's when the shortened version would be acceptable. Ksherin. So we make a diak. Why did he dafka list off these two things? And he noticeably omitted the straps of your tefillin, because there are tashmish of a mitzvah, which Rashi says there's nothing inherent in the kedusha of a piece of tchelas or a piece of grass. It's the fact that it was used for the mitzvah. That's called tashmish mitzvah. There and only there will we say a cut-off version is acceptable. Why? Because the tefillin have shemis and Torah written right on it. It's not just something that's being used for the mitzvah. It has kedusha itself because there's stuff written on it. So therefore, loy, that has a higher level of kedusha, and there, if it was chopped off the ritzuas were chopped off, loy would not be acceptable. Mechlal de is so zok kamar. If that's the case, that means you're telling me there's a minimum amount that the ritzuas have to stick out after they're not. You're telling me if it's cut off, it's not good. So if it's cut off, it's not good. So how long does that have to be? How long does the ritzua coming out of your kesher of your shorosh? How long must it be? How long must it be? Ad etzba tzarada, until the etzba tzarada, which is a question what that means. There's a big discussion what that means, and there's a big discussion if we're talking about the shal yad or the shal roish. I'm going to just go with the most pashut version. Rav Kahana machvi kafaf. So etzba tzarada means if you're measuring the distance between your thumb and your pointer, really tzarada could be the middle finger because that's where you snap. That's where you snap your fingers. But the most pashut shot is Rav Kahana machvi kafaf. He would measure the distance between the actually. Machal kava means oirech haritzua tehei oidefes ala kesher kama sheyach alivshoid me'etzba ad ama. So if you could separate and make a V formation with your pointer finger and your middle finger, that's how long the ritzua has to be. It looks like it's about 2 inches on my fingers. That's what kafuf means. Rabbi Ashi machvi pashut. It's referring to the distance between your thumb and your pointer, which is considerably further. That's how Rashi learns the Pashas. But Tosfos has a discussion that maybe it's from your shoulder down to your middle finger, and if it's Pashut, if it's Kafuf, if your finger is folded over, it's a couple of inches less. So Tosfos has a whole discussion how long it has to be. Tosfos ends up saying that the shal yad has to reach the end of his fingers, but the shal roish, he says, has to be, one side has to be connected his stomach. I'm going to read in Rashi with Phil shal roish mishayrin. I'm going to look at the second shot in Tosfos. V'yesh b'farshim, as a Tosfos, adetz b'tzarada shetzarech lasas or ritzuos, aruchas have to be long enough, mimakoim hanachasen, from the place where they're put on your arm, ad etz b'tzarada, until your middle finger, the kavav hainu shekavav es atzboi, you bend your finger over, which means not to the end of your finger, but almost to your palm, u'mashar ritzu atsham, u'pashut, so that will be the machlokes. If it has to, the difference is only a couple of inches, if it's only from the beginning of your hand or over to the end of your finger. Once you reach your stomach, until his heart. And then he brings down from the Shemusha Rabbah, one should be connected Mila, and one should be connected Alev. So the right side should go below his waist, and the left side should go at least to his heart. So there's a whole bunch of shitas as to the length of the rituals. Zog to Gemara weiter. Ravacha Yaakov kotalahu umoslislahu. What did he do? What did he do with the ritzua? Zog Rashi, what he would do is, when he put the kesher tefillin on, what he would do is, he tied it around his head. So basically, he made a knot every day. V'shiyara ritzuos pashit v'shadilu v'toil al ksefim be'achayev. So basically, what did he do? We pull him over our shoulder in the front. He would just leave him hanging off the back. Ma'abrei Ravina Ovid Kidi. I'm sorry, I think I'm skipping. Rab Kama machvi kafel for Rashi machvi pashit. Rabba katlu pashit v'shadilu. He would let it go. Rabba katalu pashit v'shadilahu. He would let it. One second. And Rabbi Acha by Yaakov katalu maslu. He would let it hang behind his back. And Marbe Dervana of Kidan, he hangs it over his front. But katalahu pashitlu, I forgot what that means. So let me quickly look here to Mesifta. He says he would tie it on his head, and the extra he would put on his shoulders behind.
Throw them back.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry, right. That's right. He would. So Rabbi Achai put him behind his back. Rabbi Kotlu, Rabbi would braid him. He would braid him or knot him up. Upashit, umataslu, and he would hang them, but he would tie them together. And marber the window avid kitidon, which is what we do. We pull it over the front of our shoulders and let it hang down over our chest. Amar Yehuda bar Rav Shmuel bar Shilas Mishmei Rav. Kesher shel tefillin halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The kesher tefillin that we have. Some people have a dalet, some people have a mem, but it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Amar Rab Nachman v'noveyan levar. The form of the dalet should look like the dalet if you're looking at it from the outside, not from the inside. Rabbi Asher Yosef kamed bar Zutra, and his hapcha lei ritzua the tefillin. His ritzua flipped over. Amar lei loy savar lormar v'noveyan levar. Don't you say that the nice part has to be on the outside? Amar lei lav I didn't notice. It says in the pasuk regarding Klal Yisrael. When the goyim see that the name of Hashem is on you, it's going to create respect. They'll be afraid of you. It's the tefillin shabarosh that's startling, that will induce fear in the people that look at us. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe wanted to see Kvod Hashem, Hashem said, I'll cover your eyes as I pass by, and after I pass by, I'll uncover your eyes, and you'll see my back. What exactly was Hashem referring to? Moshe was zeicha to see the kesher tefillin of the Rebbeinu Shalom. It has to be up on the back of his head, not down his neck. Because we want Klal Yisrael to be above. It has to be right in the center of the back, not along the sides of his head. It has to be directly opposite his face. Amar Shmuel bar Birdi, Amar Rav, Amar La, Amar Bacharicha, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Menachos, Amar Shmuel. Tefillin meimasim avar chalein. At what point do you make the bracha on the tefillin? So we're talking about the tefillin shal yad. When do you make your bracha? Mishas hanachasan. As soon as you put them on. Frank Gemara, how could you do that? Don't you need to make the bracha over lasiyasan before you put it on? V'yom Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Chal mitzvos kulam avar chalein over lasiyasan. Gemara Abaye v'Rav Amar Tevayu Mishas hanocha v'chas kshira. How do we put on the tefillin? First we put it on, then we make the bracha, and then we actually tie the knot, and we tighten up the slip knot. So that's what it means. It should be between the anocha and the kshira. There are those who learn that they used to make a new knot every single day. And it means for carrot, mishas kshira achas anocha, which is a shot that Tosfos brings down with a different girsa. And that means every morning they would make the knot, and then after they would make the knot, then they would make the bracha. Once it was ready to be put on, they made the bracha over l'siyos, and then they put it on. But the pashas of Rashi is you put it on your arm, and right before you make the bracha, you tighten it up, which is exactly what we do. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish Daf Lamed Hey, and tomorrow, B'Hashem Hashem, we're going to learn Daf Lamed Vav. Shkoyach. Everyone should have